right, welcome back. So things are looking pretty good. So we've got a little display going on here. I put back on a username for this one just because I didn't like that the cards were different heights. So the next thing we want to do is I want to make that animation effect. So this little, it's an extra thing, but it's a little animation effect. So whenever you click it, it shows or hides the username and password. And it's just kind of for fun so that you don't have to, like, if you've got your computer open, you don't have to have all your passwords up on your screen. You can just have the ones on your screen that you want to have visible at that time. Interesting, it says edit and remove on this one, whereas the one we're making says edit and delete. And you also notice that I made it to where you can click anywhere in here. So I can click on the name, that'll do it. I can click on the actual button, and that'll do it as well. So that's what we want to do next, is making that show and hide feature. So let's go ahead and get started on this guy. So I'm going to go ahead and find my password display card TS. So it looks like it's that guy right there. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to have a variable called isExpanded. And by default, isExpanded is going to be false. So it's going to be contracted. Obviously, that variable by itself doesn't do anything magically. So we've got to come over here and we've got to use that variable to hide our hidden content. So the first thing you can do if you want is you can add on an a-ngif right here. And this is present only if it is expanded. So as soon as we run this, it should actually hide that area. There mine goes. And so now they're all hidden, so that part is working. Other things we want to do is we want to be able to change it when somebody clicks. So what I'm going to do is if they click anywhere on the title, so anywhere up there, what we're going to do is we're going to change isExpanded. And normally we call functions, but just to mention it, it is valid JavaScript, so you could actually just write a line of JavaScript. So isExpanded is equal to not isExpanded. And so that click would make it show it or hide it. Now if I click in there, it shows it or hides it. Another thing we want to do is, well, you can see that it's not this smooth animation, but what we're going for is an animation effect. Animation effects take extra time, but they add value to users, and if you can delight users, it's a good thing to do. It's just hard to make time to add animations. The other thing I want to do is I want this lock to kind of be like a closed lock or an open lock. So I'm going to do that lock first, and then I'll start talking about the animations. So the idea with the lock is we're going to have another ngIf. So I'm just going to go and copy this one here. And so lock is going to show only if it's not expanded. But I'm going to have kind of the same one for if it is expanded. And instead of lock, it's called lock underscore open. There's also a trick you can do with ngIf where you can have an else case. And I'm fine either way if you want to do that or not. So let's just see if this works, and then we'll decide if we want to do it with an else or not. So if I do that, it's an open lock down there, and it's a closed lock down here. So I mean, that works out fine. All right, the next thing we want to do is we want to kind of smoothly animate this. Different things animate well, and some things animate very, very poorly. It turns out that ngIf, so right now I've got an ngIf on here, is really not animatable at all. ngIf makes something like not even exist in your DOM or be present in your DOM, and there's no really good way to animate ngIf. So I mean, if you were going to use it, basically you would bring it back, but in a hidden state, and then animate it being shown. But if you're going to bring it back in a hidden state, just don't use ngIf at all. So ngIf is not the solution to our problem. So now we need a solution to our problem. And so we're going to do it a couple of different ways. One way we can do it is we can add a class using this snippet like this. We're going to say class.hidden. And hidden will be true if it's not expanded. So what we're doing here is we're adding this class hidden, depending on whether it's expanded or not. So it's hidden if it's not expanded. Now that doesn't do anything until you actually have a class called hidden. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick it outside of the rest of my tree, just to show that you can use that trick with Sassy CSS, but you also don't have to if you don't want. And if something's hidden, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make its height be 0. And now what I'm going to do is in the non-hidden case, so this is my hidden content, I'm going to make rules for that too. So I'm going to say I've got a class called hidden content, and by default it has some rules, and then if it has both .hidden and .hidden content, then it's going to get different rules. Here's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to set my height in one case to be 105 pixels. And then in the other case, I'm going to set it to 0. So if the hidden class is present, it should go to 0. So now let's just go ahead and see what happens here. And so you can see that it sort of works. It's just that hidden is not really all that hidden. Hidden is still actually kind of visible. And so what we want to do is we want to add another rule for overflow is hidden. And just to share, like, these rules always apply. It's just that this one overrides height. So now let's see if that does it. So now with overflow hidden, now it's kind of working much better. And so now we're showing and hiding it in a different way. And we're showing it hiding by changing the hidden property. The height property. And the nice thing about the height property is that you can add pure CSS animations. So let's just say we wanted to have a transition that lasts for 300 milliseconds that used an ease in out rule. And so with this, it's going to go from 105 down to 0 in kind of a smooth animated way. So that's actually working pretty well. And so it's doing an animation which I like. The only thing that I don't like is that I had to kind of hard code that 105. And it actually turns out that there's different ways to do animations. And what we're going to do is we're going to show you a different way to do an animation. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to check it in. So this is my functional CSS based animation. And now that I've got it checked in, now I can be more willy-nilly. So now I'm just going to delete things. And I'm going to show you how to do an animation using TypeScript. And so for the TypeScript animation, we're going to take off this whole class hidden thing. And we're going to do it a different way. So Angular actually has built-in support for animations. And let's just kind of take a look at how it works, and then we'll talk about it some. So here's what we need to do. So we've got the selector, styles, US URLs, and then we're going to add one more thing to the component decorator, and that's animations. Animations, it's an array of items as well. And the items that are in here are different, let's just type them and then we'll talk about them. So I'm going to say trigger.showPassword. And it's going to be an array. So trigger, it says, hey, I don't know what you're talking about with trigger. And where is that going to come from? It's going to come from @AngularAnimations. And it seems like my importer is doing this all the time, saying animations, which is fine. And so this trigger is going to be my show password animation. And it's going to have a couple of different states in it. So it's going to have a state for collapsed. And I'm going to make it compile. I'm going to say that there's a style in here for collapsed. And then I'm going to do a very similar thing for expanded. And it's complaining that I don't know what state is, but that's fine. I can add it to the existing Angular animations. And I don't know what style is, and that also comes from animations. So I've got two states here. I've got a collapsed state and I've got an expanded state, so I can be in either one of these states. And when I'm collapsed, what I want to do is I want to set my height equal to 0, just like that. And you can put on a trailing comma if you want, but trailing comma is optional. And the nice thing about this is, I do have to spell it right, so I'm going to have to say height equals 0. But the nice thing about this is that I don't have to specify the height in the other case, because by default it gets some height based on the flow. So I only actually have to specify the collapse state of a height of 0. So what I have to do is I have to somewhere connect in the HTML. I have to connect something to this trigger, and I have to set it to be either collapsed or expanded. So let's go look to see what that code looks like. So obviously this is the spot that I want to connect to that trigger. And the way you connect it is you say and then whatever the trigger's name was, which was show password. And so show password, and it's in brackets, which means, hey, the thing that comes in here is going to be JavaScript. And what we're going to do is we're going to bind it to some variable. And so I'm going to make a variable called the show password state. And I'm going to set the show password state to either expanded or collapsed. So let's just go ahead and play with it manually first. So let's just go ahead and say expanded. And so when I save it now, everything should be in the expanded state. And if I switch it to the collapsed state, then they should all be in the collapsed state. So they're all collapsed. Now what we want to do is we want to use a trick we learned before, and that is, instead of actually making it a real property, let's make it a synthetic property. Show the show password state is going to give you a string, and it's going to give you either, so it's going to depend on this dot is expanded. So if it's expanded, then we're going to give you expanded, and if it's not, we're going to give you collapsed. So I used a ternary here as well, just to kind of keep things shorter. But now it's going to be based on this Boolean as well, and it's going to give you either the word expanded, so the state is expanded, or it's going to give you collapsed because the state is collapsed. So a couple things going on here. So now it should pop up, and so now it's functional, but it's kind of snapping there too fast. And the reason it's functional but it's snapping there too fast is because we haven't set any timing information yet. So let's go set some timing information. And the way you do that is still within this show password area. So you've set two states. You're going to set one more thing. You're going to set the transition rule. And so the transition rule kind of looks like this. Well, first off, it says transition. What you talking about? That's going to come from animations. Everything comes from animations. You give it two properties. The first is like from what state to what other state. So like we could say, from collapsed and then like over to expanded. And then you say how you want to animate that one. And so we're going to say animate, and then we just give it a time. So we'll just give it like, 0.3 seconds. It says, I don't know where animate comes from. I think you see the pattern here. And so that would actually do, when you go from collapsed to expanded, it would animate in one direction. And so now you can see that it animates that way, but then it just closes it the other. And it's entirely possible that that's what you want, so to animate one direction and then close the other. But my personal preference is that I'm just going to animate from star just means everything. From everything to everything else, so I don't care what the state is, always animate in 3 seconds. So once this reloads, you can see that it kind of does this. And so everything goes open and closed, which is kind of neat. You will notice that when the page reloads, they all kind of start open and then they all kind of close. I consider that a feature. So that's just kind of how it's going to work, and that'll be fine. Cool. So I think this video, we'll call it done, but we've got these cute little animations going on here. And we kind of showed you a couple different ways to do it. We showed you with ngF what happens, and that's completely not animatable. We showed you that you could do it with CSS. So CSS has animations capability, but then we decided to finish by showing you the Angular way to do it. So we got rid of the whole class thing, which was fun, but not the way we did it. And we replaced it with the Angular animations approach, which I think is kind of the neatest whenever it comes to the end of the day. We left the overflow hidden just because that was still a useful thing for when it was collapsed. And then in the the TS file, we added this animations rule. And then in order to convert our Boolean into a string, we had this little getter here. So this is animate using Angular animations, which I think are pretty cool. And so if you get better at Angular animations, I think that your projects and the apps that you make will really be a lot neater. All right, so I think that's enough for now. Come back next time and we'll work on our edit and delete buttons. See you then. Bye.